Okay, so once again, good day everyone. So for today, actually a while ago, I was played a video presentation about security technology, firewalls, and virtual private networks. So in this topic, we look into the understanding of and recognizing the significance of access control in computerized information system, as well as identify and explain commonly utilized authentication elements. Describe a firewall technology and the various methods for putting one place. Recognize the various methods for controlling remote and dial-up access through user authentication and authorization, and have a discussions about content filtering technology. And lastly, we look forward that we will be able to describe the technology that allows virtual private network to be used. The core aim of an information security program, unlike any other information technology program, is, to ensure that the system and their contents remain the same. Organizations spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, no, and tens of thousands of men hours to keep their data systems up to date. And these resources may be used to improve the system that support the information if it risks to information and systems did not exist. Uh, organization must comprehend the context in which information system functions in order for their information security plans to handle both current and foreseeable issues. A while ago, no, I have mentioned that this module explained the current environment and threats it possesses to businesses and their data. They integrate into an information security program, physical design. And we will look into the process by which a systems assess whether and how to let a user into a trusted region of the organization. That is information system restricted locations like computer rooms and full physical location. That is actually what we call access control. A variety of rules, programs, and technology are used to control access, and mandatory or not discretionary and discretionary access control are available. We have, of course, mandatory access control. Data classification techniques used in mandatory access control, which provide users and data owners limited control over access to the level of information and the person access to. No? We have non-discretionary control and discretionary access control. All access control systems, no, in general, rely on different mechanisms like identification, authentication, authorization, and accountability. The process of authenticating supplicants now claim identity in known as authentication. There are three types of authentication processes or authentication factors that are commonly used, like something that a supplicant is aware of, or something that a supplicant processes, or supplicant possesses, no, and something that a supplicant is or can produce. When it comes to authorization, no, the matching of an authenticated entity to a list of information asset and their accompanying access level is known as an authorization. No? And this is commonly an access control list or the ACL. Authorization can be accomplished in some ways, no, like authorization for its authorized users, group member authorization, and cross-system authorization. Another is the accountability, no, or known as auditability. No? It ensures that all actions on a system can be traced back on an identified person, whether permitted or illegal. No? The most common methods of accountability are system logs and database journals, as well as the auditing of these records. No? Firewalls, which is common, firewall processing modes, and of course, even the stateful inspection firewalls must be considered. No? We have also a term like application gateways, wherein also known as an application level firewall or applications firewall. It is often a different computer from a filtering router, but it is frequently used in tandem with one, no? Because it runs special software that acts as a proxy for a service request, no? And the application firewall is known as a proxy server, no? What else? And I think that's it for the first topic. So right after that, I'll just want to play again a video presentation for the next topic, which focus on intrusion detection and prevention system and IDISP. No? This will be the next topic right after the one that I was discussed a while ago. No?
In this video, we'll look at the intrusion prevention system and the intrusion detection system. We'll look at why we need them. We'll look at the disadvantages and advantages of the IPS and the IDS. We'll look at the different detection methodologies that we can have. Then we'll consider the actions that can be taken when an attack is detected. And we'll consider different terminologies. So we'll talk about intrusion prevention systems, that's IPS, and intrusion detection systems, that's IDS. Now let's answer the question, why? Why do we need these devices? Now, for example, on your network, you know that a user can download an email that is virus-laden. Now, this type of attacks may not be detected by your firewalls, so your firewall may not even see that type of attack, and it may not even be detected by your access rules. So when I say access rules, I mean like your ACL. So this firewall and access rule may not be able to protect against attacks like this. That's because most of the other devices that we have operate between layer 2 and layer 4. But viruses can get up to layer 7. And even those devices that have DPI, that's deep packet inspection, like the firewall, they may not be able to handle attacks that misuse certain protocols. So this is why we need intrusion prevention systems and intrusion detection systems. What do? They are purposely built to inspect traffic that is going through a network or through a host. So it's not only network IPS that we have, we also have host IPS or IDS. So they are purposely built to inspect traffic through a network and raise alarms. So they can generate alarms when an attack is detected, and they can attempt to stop those attacks. Now let's talk about the difference between the two. That's between an IPS and an IDS. The basic difference is in their placement. Let's use diagrams to explain this. If you have your system here, and let's say this is a user, and then let's just say this is a router. So this is your entire network. Now the IPS is placed inline. So it's placed inline in the traffic. So let's just say this is coming from outside, and you have a host here. So the traffic going to this inside host goes through your IPS. So your IPS is actually placed inline. And when it's placed inline like that, it has more options, like it can deny this connection, it can reset the connection. Now, if your network is like this, going to the router, going outside, and this is maybe a host on the outside. Now, if your IDS is placed here, so there will be like this, like a switch connection, and then your IDS is connected here. Now, this is how the IDS works in promiscuous mode. It's placed out of line. Promiscuous. So in promiscuous mode, you can see that it is not in the path of traffic. So the work of the switch here is that it's going to mirror the packets. So let's say the packet is coming like this. It's going to mirror that traffic, the packets of that traffic, and send it to the IDS. The IDS is going to inspect that mirror of traffic, and then it's able to say, okay, there's an attack here, and then it can generate an alarm. As you can see, since the IDS is not placed in band, the actions that you can configure for it to take is limited when compared with the IPS. But it can also do some things, like it can instruct this router. So the IDS can actually instruct the router to block that connection or things like that. We're going to see some of these options. So in general, the IPS prevents, or it can attempt to prevent an attack, and then the IDS detects an attack, although it can also attempt to prevent the attack, but the prevention mechanism is not inherent in the IDS. It can just control other devices to prevent an attack. Now let's look at the advantages and disadvantages of these systems. So let's consider the IDS first. The major advantage is that since it's not inline, it's not in the path of traffic, that means it does not introduce latency or delay to the traffic. But its major disadvantage is that it is limited in its prevention capabilities. So limited prevention capabilities, that's because the prevention capabilities is not of the IDS itself. It can just instruct other routers or switches or something to block that malicious traffic. Now when we look at the IPS, the advantage is just the opposite of this. So it has prevention capabilities. So you have more prevention capabilities. And then the disadvantage is that because it's inline, you can introduce delay to the network traffic. Also, if the IPS fails for whatever reason and there's no other path through the network, then you've basically black holed your entire traffic. Well, except the IDS is doing fail open. The opposite of fail open will be fail close. So fail close means that if I fail, then nothing should be able to pass through. Fail open means if I fail, then you should allow things to pass through. Now let's look at different intrusion detection methodologies. So how do these systems work? What methods do they use? Methodologies. Now, according to the National Institute of Standards and Technology, that's NIST, there are three main methods. And the first one is signature-based detection. Now, if an attack is carried out in a particular way, then you can say this attack has a signature. For example, if it is known that an email with the subject pass CCNA security, and then to have like an attachment of pass CCNA security.exe. So this will be the subject, and this will be the attachment. This is the signature of this particular attack. So the IDS or whatever system that is using this type of methodology will just check through emails, and then the subject of pass CCNA coupled with an attachment titled pass CCNA security signifies an attack. But there's a problem with this type of detection method. So it can only detect known attacks. That's why you always have to wait for an update of your antivirus or something, because some of them use signature-based detection. But signature-based detection can actually be very effective, and it is actually the most used type of detection. The second method that is used is anomaly-based detection. So an anomaly is something that is not normal. Therefore, this detection method compares activities to a baseline. So you have a baseline of what is considered normal. And any activity that goes above the baseline, according to certain thresholds, will be considered an attack. So for example, if a department whose function deals with mainly sending emails, so they don't consume a lot of bandwidth, maybe they consume about 5% of your bandwidth. If that department suddenly starts consuming 90% of your bandwidth, then you know that there's a problem. And this is how the detection method works. This detection method is very effective against previously unknown attacks. And so it can provide protection for day zero attacks. Day zero attacks are just attacks that were previously unknown. Cool. The third type is the stateful protocol analysis. It is actually very similar to the deep packet inspection, but it is not restricted to network activities. You also have host activities also. So remember the TCP three-way handshake, SYN, SYN-ACK, and then ACK in this order. So if you see the ACK before the SYN, then you know that there's an attack. So it means that the protocol is being used in a way that it was not intended to be used. Now we have other detection methodologies like policy-based and also reputation-based. And the good thing is that many IDS systems do not use just one type of detection. They are able to combine more than one. So you can have an IPS system that uses stateful, anomaly, and signature-based. And so they can be seen as hybrid systems. And even Cisco's implementation of the IPS is actually hybrid. So what are the possible actions that can be configured when an attack has been detected? Now for the IDS, well, in this case, I'm talking about the Cisco's implementation of the IDS. You could have the request block connection. So it's going to request whatever device, so maybe the router, it's going to request that device to block the connection. You also have request block host. So while one is just going to block that particular connection, this one is going to block the host completely. So when I say IDS, I mean these are the prevention actions that the IDS can be configured to take. But it also means that the IPS is also capable of providing these things. Now, the ones that are specific to the IPS include denying the connection inline. So you'll notice here that the IPS is the one who is going to deny the connection. The IDS is going to request for the connection to be denied. You also have deny packet inline. So one will block the entire connection while the other one will just block the packet. You also have deny attacker inline. So it's similar to this request block host. Now other actions that you can have include to just produce an alert. You could have login actions, so you can log what happened, or you can reset TCP connections. Now let's talk about terminologies that you have to be familiar with when it comes to IPS and IDS. The first one is true positive. Now, true positive means that malicious packets pass through the network or pass through the host, and then the IPS generated an alarm. Now, the other good one is true negative. Now, true negative means that non-malicious packet pass through. So that's just normal traffic pass through the network and no alarm was generated. So these are the correct actions of the IPS. This means that the IPS took the correct actions. Now the wrong actions are false positive. False positive means that non-malicious traffic passed through the network or passed through the host and an alarm was generated. Now the other wrong action is false negative. So false negative means that malicious traffic passed through and no alarm was generated. This has to be the worst because it means malicious traffic passed through and the IPS or the IDS did not detect it. False positive just means that you have a lot on your head and maybe people are being denied. But it's better to deny legitimate traffic than to allow illegitimate traffic. This brings us to the end of this video where we have been introduced to the intrusion prevention system and the intrusion detection system. We have considered why we need them, we have seen the disadvantages and advantages of either one of them, we have looked at different detection methods like signature-based and anomaly-based, we have seen the actions that can be taken, and we have considered different terminologies like true positive and false negative. I hope you have found this video informative and I'd like to thank you for watching.
Okay. As the video presentation mentioned that, of course, right now, there are certain best practices of firewalls. No, the trusted networks. No, traffic is permitted to live. No, for configuration or administrative purposes, the firewall device is never directly accessible from the public network. No. SMTP data, no, is allowed to pass over the firewall, but it is routed, no, to a properly configured SMTP gateway, which filters and routes messaging traffic safely. All data sent over the Internet Control Message Protocol should be rejected. All data access to all internal servers, no, through the telnet or terminal emulation from public network should be restricted. When web services are provided outside the firewall, the HTTP traffic should be routed from a proxy or DMZ designed to keep it out of internal networks. All the data cannot be verified, no, as genuine should be rejected. Firewall works by evaluating a data packet and comparing it to some established logical criteria, as what we have mentioned earlier. No, the logic is based on outgoing requests for information, and it is based on a set of rules programmed in by a firewall administrator or developed dynamically. No, because firewall rules, no, rule-based or firewall logic are all terms that used to describe this logic collection. So packet header information is used by most firewalls to assess whether a packet should be permitted to pass through or drop. No, the notion of anything which is not permitted is banned. Govern firewall rules, often known as expressly permitted rules. In other words, unless a rule expressly permits inaction, it is prohibited. Now, and you must be able to design a simple rules and comprehend how they interact in order to better grasp more complicated rules. Actually, there are many guidelines, no, and the exercise that follows are based on the best practices as what we have mentioned earlier. Now, another thing that we need to look into, of course, is the content filters. No? It is very technical actually. No? So if you don't have any idea about the cybersecurity or information assurance and security, it's too hard to grasp everything. No? But of course, this course is just only a theoretical description or discussions of what is information assurance and security, because the application of this is in IAS2 dapat. No? So the content filter is another tool that can protect an organization systems from misuse and accidental denial of service attacks. And it is commonly used in conjunction with firewalls. Content filter is software filter, not a firewall. Take note of it. Again, a content filter is a software filter, not a firewall, that allows network administrator to control access to material within a network. It is essential, or it is essentially a set of scripts or programs that prevents users from obtaining specified sort of example of internet information, or restrict user access to certain networking protocols and internet destinations, no? Because their principal aim is to restrict internal access to the external material. Content filters are also referred to as a reverse firewall, no? Actually, the content filter has two parts in most implementation models. Nandiyan yung rating or rating and filtering, no? So most commonly, kapag narinig niyo yun. Organization or the business establishment or even the government agencies, no, rarely develop networks that are only used by person who live in that location. When connecting one network to another, the connection must be carefully structured and controlled, because the installation of such networks, no, connection necessitates the use of leased lines or other data channels offered by common carriers, and these connections are often permanent and protected under the terms of a formal service agreement. So when individuals desire to connect to an organization networks, whether they are employees working from home, contract workers contracted for a specific assignment, or other workers who are traveling, a more flexible choice must be provided. Previously, no, an enterprise only offered this remote connection using dial-up services, such as remote authentication services. Other methods, such as virtual private networks, have grown in popularity as the internet has become more widely used in recent years. Now, prior to the internet, no, businesses established private networks and allowed individuals and other businesses to connect to them via dial-up, no, or leased lines. Actually, into this networking environment where internet connections are ubiquitous, dial-up access and leased lines from customers' network are utilized less frequently right now, no, because firewalls, no, protect the interface between company networks and the internet. Although dial-up and leased lines connections are becoming less popular, they are still widely used, no? And it is widely assumed that these insecure dial-up connection points pose a significantly security risk, no? Because an attacker who suspects a company has dial-up lines can use a device known as war dialer to track down the connection points, no? So a war dialer, no, is an automatic phone dialing program that dials every number in a predetermined range, no? Siyempre, from 555-100 to 555-2000, and check to see if a person, answering machine, or modern answers, no, yung ginagamit natin na robotics na most commonly, no. Now, a while ago, no, our video presentation mentioned about Kerberos, no. Kerberos actually and Sesame are the two authentication technologies that allow secure third-party authentication. I don't know if somebody presently working as a network administrator. So if you are a network administrator, I think you have an idea about Kerberos and Sesame or Sesame. Now, this will be the two authentication technologies that can allow secure third-party authentication. Kerberos, no, uses symmetric key encryption to validate an individual user access multiple network resources, no. It is named after the three-headed hound of Greek mythology, no. And another, of course, is it made up of three interconnected services that all use the same database library. Yun siya, no, si Kerberos. On the other hand, no, Sesame, or ang Sesame stands for Secure European System for Application in Multi-Vendor Environment. Yung ibig sabihin ng Sesame, no? It is the result of the European Commission-funded research and development initiative. Sesame works in the same way of Kerberos, in that the user must first authenticate with the authentication server before receiving a token. So the token is then provided to privileged attribute server rather than Kerberos ticket granting service. Now, as proof of identity, in the order to obtain a privileged attribute certificate. No, the privileged attribute certificate is similar to Kerberos ticket, but it adheres to the European Computer Manufacturers Association and International Organization of Standardizations, Protocols, and Distribution Procedures. No, we have, of course, the virtual private networks. No, and this is a private and secure network communications capacity. No, it is a private data networks that utilizes public telecommunication infrastructure while ensuring anonymity through the use of tunneling protocol and security protocols. No? Meron din nga tinatawag na hybrid VPN, which combines encrypted transmission across part of all a trusted VPN network. So it means to say that regardless of the technologies and protocols employed, a virtual private network that offers to provide a secure and dependable capability while relying on public network must achieve. No, actually, when I was visited China, last a month ago, for you to use some social media network, social media page, you are required to install a virtual private network wherein you are required to pay. May mga license, may mga, syempre, lagi namang meron hindi license, kaya lang at stake, kaya better for you to have to pay a virtual private network in China for you to browse the social media like Facebook, Instagram, and so on. You could able naman, but there is certain restriction. What you're going to do is to install virtual private network and pay for the VPN for you to utilize the social media. Because again, a VPN in its most basic form allows a user to turn the internet into a private network. So the internet, as you may know, is anything but private. However, utilizing the IP packet within an IP packet method to transport data safely and securely, an individual or organization can set up tunneling sites throughout the internet and send encrypted data back and forth. So, but VPN or virtual private networks are straightforward to set up and operate with the tunneling points, typically simply needing to be dual home. That is linking a private network to the internet or another outside connection point. Okay, I think familiar kayo sa Microsoft Server software, including in 2000, includes VPN functionality as well as client support for VPN services in XP. Okay. We have, of course, transport mode. Transport mode, the data within an IP packet are encrypted in transport mode, but the header information is not. And this allows the user to create a secure link with the remote host while merely encrypting the packet's data context. Now, ano nga lang ang disadvantages niya? That packet, when it comes to transport mode, the packet eavesdroppers can still identify the target systems with this solution. So once an attacker knows the destination, he or she may be able to breach one of the end nodes and steal the packet data. So transport mode, on the other hand, does away with that requirement for specific servers and tunneling software, allowing end user to send data from anywhere. And this is especially handled by employees who travel or work from home. Okay. And I think that's it for this topic. Okay. When it comes to intrusion detection and preventive system, people are just as important as technical controls in protecting. Wait lang. Can you hear me naman, class? Okay naman.
Yes po.
Okay. Kasi baka daldal ako ng daldal.